Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to the review of our final practice game of season 2025. North Melbourne going down in heartbreaking fashion, losing to West Coast at Hands Oval. North were dominant all day with the exception of a 10-minute patch in the second quarter, but we just could not get the job done. And the old saying goes, bad kicking is bad footy, and that was definitely the case at Hands Oval yesterday. West Coast 11-10-71 defeated North Melbourne 9-15-69. There's a lot to unpack from this one, so let's not waste any time. Let's just get straight to it. That scoreline tells a very telling tale. North was so inaccurate in front of goal, which is quite a surprise because I thought last year one of our strengths were quite efficient in front of goal. Despite the fact that we didn't win any games or generate super high scores, we were pretty efficient when we were having shots on goal, especially in that first quarter. You wonder how differently the game could have gone and would have gone had we been a little bit more accurate in front of goal. North had 9 scoring shots to 1 in the first quarter. We absolutely dominated. We only scored 3 goals, 6 behinds, and that ultimately left the door ajar for West Coast to kind of come in and wrestle the game back a little bit on their own terms. Like I said, in that second quarter, West Coast came out all guns blazing and just had 10 minutes of sheer dominance. They wrestled the game back onto their own terms. I think they hit the lead, and after that, we were able to kind of steady the ship once again, and it was a pretty much neutral game, a pretty much an arm wrestle for the rest of the 2.5 quarters of the game. But overall, the intensity of the game was high. It was a pretty entertaining game of footy. It's definitely one of the more exciting games we've seen over the practice match period this far, and I was so much more pleased with the effort and the ferocity that we came out with against West Coast last night. And I think a lot of fans, I said this in my review of the D's game last week, a lot of fans, despite the fact that it's just a practice game, were probably feeling really disappointed just over the hype and the build-up that we've kind of experienced basically since the end of the trade period, I would say. And it's just been getting louder and louder and louder up until that point where we fell over to the D's in the end last weekend. But last night against West Coast was a different story. We were really, really intense. We were playing with a lot of intent. We looked like we were switched on a lot better. It was a lot more North branded, and it's a lot more what I expect to see from us come round 1 in the next couple of weeks. So overall, despite the fact that we couldn't register a winning score, I was a lot happier with the output. I was a lot happier with the game style. We kind of looked like we knew what we were doing a lot more, and I think it's a lot more comforting sitting here at the end of this game, at the end of now the entire preseason as a whole, which is officially over, and kind of feeling a lot more comfortable with where we're at heading into round 1 when we play the Dogs in a couple of weeks' time. Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and who knows how the game would have gone after halftime had we been able to convert a little bit better in front of goal. But one thing I can say about our forward line with the presence of Jack Darling there is how much more dynamic and how much more unpredictable we look going into the forward 50. Now, Jack Darling, I think, is going to divide a lot of people his game. He presented so strong at the ball. He was in so many contests. He's so physical. He's really, really hard to match up against, but in front of goal, just the 3 behinds for him, unfortunately, just couldn't convert. He wasn't alone, but had he been able to maybe ice a couple early, maybe that would have changed the momentum of the game. But the one thing I do love about Jack Darling, and what you can kind of see, it was even more obvious in the game against West Coast last night, our options going forward just wide open now. We are so much more unpredictable going forward. Darling's an option. Nick Larkey looks like he's a lot more confident as well, albeit he maybe didn't have the impact on the scoreboard as well, but he was presenting really, really strong up the ground, providing a really solid option for us to be able to continue generating movement and generating our ball moving forward. Paul Curtis, he was lively. Cam Zurhaar, I thought, had a really good game. We're used to seeing Cam Zurhaar in the more attacking, presenting forward role, and Paul Curtis taking maybe more of that defensive role, but I thought they kind of swapped their roles last night. Paul Curtis was the one presenting at the ball. He was the one having shots on goal. He did kick a couple of goals himself, whereas Cam Zurhaar looked like he was taking more of that defensive role, but they all kind of worked really well in unison. And when someone like Zane Dersma comes back into the side, and if he is a hybrid between a forward and a midfielder, you can see how he'd be able to create another option. So all of a sudden we just have a forward line that is functioning so much better, looks a lot more dynamic. And it's no disrespect to someone like Bryn Teakle or Coleman Jones or even Toby Pink, who've all played forward at some point over the last 12 months. But the thing with Darling being that natural forward, he is a genuine second key forward. So he does give us the footy smarts and the options. And you can't buy experience and you can't buy longevity and sustainability, and there's a reason why Darling has been in the game for so long. He just adds so much to our side, and albeit you won't be looking at his score sheet probably at the end of most games and thinking, wow, he's having a massive impact. But to the naked eye, and when you're watching as the game goes on, it just opens us up so much more. He also can pinch hit in the ruck for Sherry, which again is just an added bonus for us. It allows us more flexibility. It allows us more options up forward. So I really, really enjoyed his game and how he was able to contribute to a forward line that functioned so well as a whole. In terms of the way we played and the sort of the North Melbourne blueprint from last night, we definitely played a lot more consistently. Our game flowed a lot better. We weren't playing chunks of attack and then chunks of defense. We were kind of able to shift gears in the game as the situation demanded of us. We were really, really defensive and intense in that first quarter in particular. I think we had like 7 or 8 tackles to nothing to start the game, 5 inside our forward 50. So we really set the standard and really set the tone early. But we also were on the attack, and that was really pleasing. Something I took out of our game last week against the D's, and I said this in my review, is that our first half, we made it a scrap and it was incredibly defensive, and we really just kept the game tight and a real tough contest, whereas in the second half the game just sort of opened up a lot more and we were able to move the ball a lot more freely, but then so did the opposition. So last night, to be able to shift gear in game and in quarter when the situation demanded of us, I thought that was a lot more pleasing. Unfortunately, the skills still just aren't there. While our forward line functioned a lot better and we just looked a lot more dangerous when we were entering the forward 50, our execution into the forward 50 is still a massive issue for me. We can't seem to pinpoint passes. We can't seem to lower the eyes. There were a few really nice passes and a few really nice marks and a few really nice passages of play, but as a whole, there's still a lot more bombing it inside long into our forward 50 when we're under pressure, especially when we're taking the ball out of the center of the ground. And that is so detrimental to our game, because last night our midfield just dominated the clearances, and that is where a lot of our dominance came from as a whole and as a side. And that's what allowed us to dictate play for a lot of the game, is that we were winning the ball out of the center of the ground. But there's no use in doing that if you're just going to butcher the ball long inside forward 50 and hope that someone's going to be on the end of it. We need a lot more patience, and we need a lot more time, and we need to create. It's not necessarily about slowing down per se, but we just really need to find a way to control the ball a lot better and just to be a lot smarter. We can win the ball out of the center and then find an option in the midfield to kind of settle and slow the play down and then go again. Because I feel like if we don't have time to think and we don't have time to process what we're doing, we end up butchering the ball. And a lot of the time we're under so much pressure, we put ourselves under so much pressure, then maybe that trickles onto the rest of the side. It's an issue we've had for so long, and it's something that doesn't seem to be fixed at the moment, and it's taking a really long time for it to be fixed. I don't know, it's obviously not something you can fix overnight, but this is an age-old problem. This is even before Alistair Clarkson's time. We've had an issue with execution into our forward 50, and we've now got the cattle, we've got the appropriate players, we've got the appropriate matchup, so we can actually allow these guys to play to their strengths, and we're just not allowing them to do that. So big tick for the midfield, because I thought the midfield did play overall really well last night, particularly at stoppage and at centre bounces. We just dominated the clearances, but for us to be not able to transition the ball cleanly into our forward 50, often at times kicking it to Jeremy McGovern. I thought McGovern played an excellent game. And then when we did get it into the hands of our forwards, they couldn't finish in front of goal. So a little bit jittery and a little bit unsure about us in front of goal and maybe skills still as a whole, but I know it's just a practice game, but I was a lot happier overall with the blueprint and the style of play. It felt like we had an identity. It felt like we kind of knew what we were doing. It kind of felt like everyone sort of on the same page, which was really, really nice to see. Sorry, just had a change of light there. The sun is streaming through. Let's keep going to the back line. I do feel for the back line. I thought they actually were quite resilient for big patches of that game, but there's only so much they're going to be able to stop, and we do say this time and time again, especially that ball in the first 10 minutes of the second quarter. Everything Jake Waterman was able to get his hands on turned into gold. It wasn't Aiden Corr's night. Waterman definitely got the better of him at the end of the day, but I thought they were quite resilient, particularly in that fourth quarter. They really did stand up and weather the storm for the most part. Unfortunately, it wasn't the full quarter. They weren't able to sustain it, but I thought that each Logue, Comben and Core did some really nice things. I thought Logue was quite good. For us, I thought he was a really, really strong option down in defence, but unfortunately, there's only so much they were able to stop, and that, again, has been a problem with having inconsistency in our backline as well. I mean, these guys as a trio have not really played much football together whatsoever. I think they've only played like a quarter and a half of footy as a solid three. I'm talking about genuine game time. Griffin Logue only played 2 games last year against Carlton, and Charlie Comben spent half that game in the forward line and then against Geelong the week later, and then he was done for the rest of the year. They might need a little bit more time for the three of them to kind of gel together and play a little bit better together as a trio, but I thought for the most part they were pretty resilient and they did weather the storm as best as they could. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and Jake Waterman in particular just completely dominated and absolutely had the better of us and was one of the best players for West Coast on the ground. So I thought that it was not ideal, obviously, and it wasn't great. And you need to be able to weather the storm a lot longer. You need to kind of sustain it. And I know that's definitely something we need to work on. But I did think for majority of the game, bar a couple of patches of time in that second and fourth quarters, the defence did stand up really well. And that maybe also trickles further up a field to the midfield, because a lot of that is the quick transition from coast to coast. And that was another thing we spoke about last week, is that we were unable to answer the Ds when they did go coast to coast from our backline to their forward line. Responsibility doesn't just fall on the backline in that instance. It also falls on the midfield, who are unable to stop the run of play and are unable to apply enough pressure to create a contest and to create a stoppage, because teams are just poking holes through us way too easily. And unfortunately, it's the back line that gets exposed one out, because the work isn't done further afield to stop that from happening. As I mentioned before, North were able to get their hands on the footy really, really well in the middle of the ground. We were often at first to the ball, and leading the way was Harry Sheezel. I don't actually know what more I can say about Harry Sheezel that hasn't been said already. It was another complete performance by him. He absolutely led from strength to strength in the middle of the ground. He had 36 touches, 7 clearances, 3 tackles, 6 marks and a goal. It was a phenomenal performance, and I've seen a lot of talk on the internet this week about Harry Sheezel, and he's nowhere near as good as Nick Dacos. He's never going to be as impactful as Nick Dacos. Maybe he doesn't need to be. And I know that people are going to be like, what is she talking about? But I know that, and I'm contributing to the conversation by making YouTube videos and talking about it, but we actually don't need to have one be better than the other. Like, Harry Sheezel and Nick Dacos are 2 of the best players in the competition at the moment. And we are so privileged to be able to watch these guys in their prime, week in, week out, doing their thing. I don't know why there needs to be one better than the other. I don't think there needs to be this constant competition and comparison. I think both of them are unbelievable players. You cannot deny how talented both of these guys are. And I feel like we should just take more time to appreciate what each of them do for their respective clubs and what they do for the competition. In terms of Harry Sheezel, the impact that Harry Sheezel is having at North Melbourne, I don't think can be measured by what he does week to week on the field. Not only is he a star and he's leading with his actions on field, but off field, he is so important to this football club. He will be a leader of this football club in the near future. I have absolutely no doubt about that. I think everyone feels the same way. He makes people care about North Melbourne. He is marketable. He puts himself out there, and he's such an incredible spokesperson and role model for this football club. And he really is a beacon of hope and light for a club that has been struggling for a very, very long time down the bottom of the ladder. What he's doing at a club that has been struggling on field, I think, means so much for us. And it's not to say that Nick Dacos isn't doing the same thing at Collingwood and carrying on the legacy of his family name and his father. There's no doubt that he is an exceptional talent and he is an unbelievable footballer, but I don't think that there needs to be this weird comparison. And I think last night's performance from Harry is just another example of how powerful he is and how impactful he is for North Melbourne. And I think that people just need to take a bit of time to A, realise this, but B, just show him a bit more respect. There doesn't need to be discussion like this. Show both of them a little bit more respect. I think they don't need, and I know that it's part and parcel of being a footballer and the media cycle, and like I said, I'm contributing to this conversation, but that's just what I wanted to say about Harry and about the discussion that sort of carried on during the week. That performance last night spoke volumes on its own. I don't really need to say anything more about that. Hey guys, Man's coming to you quickly from the future. I can't believe I forgot to mention LDU. That is just so embarrassing on my behalf. So I just wanted to quickly insert a little clip here and talk about him. He is so classy, and I think the longer time goes on and the more we watch him play, the more important it is for us to be able to secure his signature to stay at North Melbourne long term. I think we would, and I've spoken about this before, I think we'd be fine if he didn't stay, but what he does add, just what he can do and the way he can move through traffic is second to none. It is something we haven't seen at an AFL level for a very, very, very long time. He had another excellent game last night, and I think that he just constantly shows us how important he is to this side. And I think that if we had him in our side long term, the confidence we would have and just the way we'd be able to move the ball, I think, just completely transformed. So big disrespect on my behalf to LDU. My apologies, but I had to just quickly insert this and give him his flowers and his praise that he so well deserves. Sticking with the midfield, and if last night taught me one thing, it's that Will Phillips should be a lock in this side in round one. He was exceptional yet again last night, and I think he's really come on in leaps and bounds over the pre-season. You can tell this is a man who will do absolutely anything to cement his spot. His work in the middle of the ground at the clearance is absolutely sensational. I think he's had such an impressive return. I think that everything he's been doing is what we've been waiting for him to do for so long, and maybe his numbers weren't massive, but I think his impact was great. I also just loved the way that he went off with a blood rule and came straight back on and was just as hard at the footy and had just as much as an impact. So I really, really loved the game that he had. He had 18 touches, 6 tackles and 3 clearances. So I really loved what he did, and I love what he's been doing over the past few months for North. I also loved the game from Finn O'Sullivan, and I think North fans can really see how exciting and what a great addition he is going to be to our side. I thought that he definitely worked into the game. I don't know if he had an impact straight away, but I think as the game went on, he definitely grew in confidence, and I absolutely loved what I saw from him as well. And I think he really should be making his debut in round one. There was talk that he would come in early, but I think after last night and after what he's shown over the past couple of weeks as well in the intra-club and then again against Melbourne, I really feel like he is a lock for round one. I would be really disappointed if we didn't see him in that side. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing him on the big stage. The other player I wanted to talk about was Tom Powell. He was shoulder to shoulder with Harley Reid for majority of the night and absolutely had Harley covered. Sorry for all those Harley Reid fans out there, but it was absolutely Tom Powell's day. Not only did he keep Harley at bay, but he had an absolutely ripper game himself. 25 touches, 11 marks, 5 tackles, 2 clearances and a goal. If you don't mind, Tom Powell is going to be the breakout player of season 2025. It's been spoken about internally, it's been spoken about externally. I just think he is primed and ready on the back of a really solid season last season to go one better again in season 2025, and last night was another example of how that can come to fruition. Tristan Xerri once again continuing on that powerful 2024 season with another big performance in the ruck last night. 34 hit-outs to go with 14 tackles and 5 clearances. The man is a monster. Like, he is just so fearless. He throws his body at everything, at every contest. And that's exactly what you want from a ruckman. You want him to have impact around the ground. He only had the 2 marks, but I felt like he was presenting at the ball a lot more. He was also providing an option like Larky further afield and around the ground as we needed. I also loved the game from Caleb Daniel. His helmet co-partner, I think Caleb Daniel has added such an incredible element to our game. His work rate is probably one of the best in the side, if not the top three of our side. He is just constantly buzzing, he's constantly moving, he's constantly providing us with an option, and I think that is so important for a side that can at times be stagnant and get caught out, not really moving and presenting at the ball and creating options for the midfield to transition the ball down the ground. He's constantly running. He was involved in multiple chains from coast to coast and at multiple different points. Like, he wasn't just doing one thing and then pissing off. He was constantly there for the overlap, for the 1-2. So I love what Caleb Daniel is adding to this side. I also really liked the game from Dylan Stephens. It's a bit of a interesting one. I have never been super crash hot, admittedly, on Dylan Stephens. I can understand wanting to bring him in to complement Bailey Scott on one wing and the other, but I've just never really felt like he's shown enough for me personally to say, yep, you are someone that I would have in our best 23. I still don't know if I feel that way, to be honest, but I did like the game he played last night. Similarly to Jack Darling, alleviating the pressure on the forward line and allowing the forwards to function a lot better as a unit. I thought that Dylan Stephens allowed Bailey Scott to have a really, really nice game. He freed up Bailey Scott a little bit. It's not so much what he did on the stat sheet. It's just more about the naked eye. And again, it's just providing that other option to allow the guys that need to stand up to do their thing. So another one that I thought, I don't know if I would have him in my 23 come round one. I think with the likes of Parker and the likes of Simpkins still to come back into this side, I don't know if he's done enough to cement his spot. But I do think that he did play well last night and he did play his role, and you need the role players to be able to alleviate the flashier players and the superstar, quote unquote, players to do their thing. And I think that's exactly what Dylan Stephens did last night. So didn't mind his game at all. Heading into this game, and I spoke about this in my preview, there were two positions on the ground that I was watching with intent because I wanted to see how each of the player probably fighting out for that spot would respond. The first one was that small forward position. We've got both Robert Hansen Jr. and Jacob Constanti in that position, and I said in my preview that I don't think both of them should play round one. I think there's only room for one of them at the moment, and I'd say Robert Hansen Jr. is probably the one I would go with come round one. Constanti just didn't do enough for me. He was really good defensively last week, but he just was missing in action, unfortunately, last night, whereas Robert Hansen Jr. did look quite lively around the ball. Again, he's just a bit of a spark, and he's a bit of a live wire, and I think that we do already have players like Cam Zurhaar played last night, like Jack Darling has been playing in the past, who do have that defensive element to their game, and I think that those guys are the guys I'd be looking to do that alongside attacking at the ball and presenting at the ball and maybe rotating through the midfield and the ruck for Jack Darling. But Constanti, if that's the only thing he's going to provide in the game, then I just don't know if it's worth keeping him in the side. And I don't think that it's a forever thing. Maybe he'll get his opportunity again in the future, but right now he's not doing enough for me in comparison to a Hansen Jr. who was a little bit more lively, had 12 touches. He didn't kick a goal last night, but I just like the way that he presents the ball. I like that you kind of feel like anything can happen when he gets his hands on the footy. So I think trying to get him involved with the play as much as possible would be to our benefit. So he'd be the one that I would start with come round one and see what he can do and if he can hold his spot. The other one is down the other end, Darcy Tucker and Luke McDonald. I think both of them good defensively, but really poor in terms of their skill, and just maybe not up to scratch in that respect. I thought Luke McDonald's game was actually quite good last night. I know there's going to be people again that disagree with me, but I thought that he was really good. He was providing some options. He did look quite solid down in defence. So again, if we're going to go for one over the other, I'd probably opt for Luke McDonald over Darcy Tucker. I was really disappointed that Riley Hardiman didn't get to play any of the game last night. Miller Bergman was subbed in late in the fourth quarter. He did get his hands on the footy a little bit. The thing with Miller Bergman is I feel like he's very similar to Tucker and McDonald. Maybe doesn't play the same way. Maybe he does play more of that attacking ball, but his skill also isn't ideal, in my opinion anyway. I think that Hardiman or Goda are the players that we probably need to try in that position. I think that if we're not going to go for Sheasel and Colby, and I don't think either of them should go anywhere near the back line if we can avoid it, I think they're a lot more dangerous and a lot more threatening, and they contribute a lot much better when they're pushed up further up the ground. So I don't know. I wish we did see, and I was really excited to see Riley named in the squad for last night's game, and then for him not to play. I think it would have been to our benefit to see what he could do and to see if he could add a bit of dynamic, a bit of energy to that back line and play really well alongside Caleb Daniel. I'm sure his time will come, and I know that I'm hot on him, so I want to see him out there, and maybe that's not the reality at the moment, but I still am not sure about that second attacking defender. I think we really, really need it, and I don't know if Tucker's the answer at the moment. I do like Tucker, and I do like what he brings, and again, he's a role player, and he allows the other guys to do the things they need to do, but how much of that is to our detriment, I'm not so sure. To round out what was a disappointing yet entertaining game of footy for North fans, come our press conference post-game, and it was Xavier Clark who took the press conference rather than Alistair Clarkson. There was rumours that Clarko didn't actually coach the game against the D's last week, and I wonder if the same thing happened this week. I find it a really interesting thing. Look, I mean, again, it's pre-season and we're just trying different things. I just would love Clarko to get back in the box seat and really start driving this ship. We are only 2 weeks away from our first game of the season. I think that it would have been really great to have him in the driver's seat. Now, maybe he was, and Xavier just took the press conference. I know Xavier Clark had a great hit out with the Indigenous All-Stars at Optus Stadium a couple of weeks ago, but I just think it would have been really, really nice if we kind of started to bring all the bits and pieces together on field and off field to get us ready for round one. But we still had an entertaining contest. I thought Hands Oval was interesting. It's definitely giving local footy down in Bunbury. The surface itself looked really nice, and the oval itself looked really, really lovely. I don't know about the experience as a whole. If you were there at the game, let me know how you went. Let me know what your thoughts were. If you were watching from home or if you joined our watch along, thank you so much. Pommy and I had such a great time. So many of you tuned in. It was awesome to share the night with you guys. What did you think of the game? Leave all of your thoughts in the comments down below. How much should we take away from this? It's just a practice, but it was really, really exciting, and there was a lot to like from that game over at Hands Stadium. Let's keep the conversation going this week. We are so close to round one. I feel like we can all taste it. Footy is officially back this week. It's time to wind ourselves up and to get ourselves going for season 2025. Let's keep chatting over on socials, Kanga TV Show on Instagram, X, Facebook. If you have more to say, you can send me an email, kangatvshow@gmail.com. I look forward to talking all things round one. It's time to get ourselves going. It's time to get ready for season 2025. It's here. We're about to do this all together. It's about to be a crazy year, and I can't think of anyone else I'd rather share it with than you guys at home. I look forward to seeing you soon. I look forward to talking all things North Ball with you very, very soon. See you then.